Should you read Slow Productivity by Cal Newport? Yes. Why? Slow Productivity is a goldmine of information on how we can work less, slow down, and enjoy life without sacrificing our livelihoods. Cal, the author of other books such as Digital Minimalism, Deep Work, and So Good They Can't Ignore You, tells us about people throughout history who saw tons of success using slow, methodical, leisurely work styles. Today, I'm going to break down all of the standout moments in this book by my opinion, and I'm going to be going into my favorite pieces of advice that Cal gives us throughout the book that you can start implementing in your life right now, before your Amazon order can even get here. For me, I've been trying to unlearn the belief that I have to sit and hustle for 14 hours a day and never leave my desk in order to achieve the types of success that I want. Well, after searching for literally weeks and months, I am very happy to report that Slow Productivity is exactly the book that I was looking for. Cal breaks down the book in 2 parts, over 5 chapters, with a little over 200 very easily digestible and very easy to read pages. The book is packed with tons of really amazing practical advice and insights that you can start using literally right away. The book is divided into the 3 principles of slow productivity. Each principle, of course, is its own chapter in part 2. We have do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. What I found most compelling was that all of these chapters don't, on the surface, seem like particularly, like good ideas. However, by the time I got to the first principle of do fewer things, I was already hooked and sold by the first 50 pages because he provided so much value in part 1 of the book that I just kind of trusted him at that point. Part 1 begins with chapter 1, which is called The Rise and Fall of Pseudo-Productivity. This chapter is mostly setup, but it is packed full of some pretty crazy insights. Pseudo-productivity is defined here as the use of visible activity as the primary means of approximating actual productive effort. Cal starts a story about CBS and how they almost went under and uses that story and weaves it throughout the whole first chapter as a way to kind of illustrate his points. And I thought it was really interesting. And the way it rounds out is super cool. There's also so much good information and context in here. I was really genuinely surprised by how much I was immediately highlighting almost everything in the book right away. The best part that made me want to review this book is that it kept me doing that throughout the whole thing. There was so much highlighting. I'm gonna have to try very hard to not just read this book to you. The first thing Cal sets up for us is, what does productivity actually mean? He winds through a short but important little setup to whine on the fact that knowledge workers have no agreed upon definition of what productivity even means. I suppose now is a good time to explain that a knowledge worker, which is the term he uses throughout most of the book, is someone that works a white-collar position, like a graphic designer or an accountant or a project manager, something like that, usually an office job. Cal also explains that not having a measure of productivity be an official thing is pretty unusual because most blue-collar professions have that, whether it be homes built per month or crops harvested per hour. There's usually some sort of metric that can measure productivity. Knowledge workers, on the other hand, through a bunch of surveys, have shown that they all kind of just have their own meaning of what that means. The most common denominator from all of the surveys seems to be hours worked and tasks done, rather than something trackable like return on investment. Cal goes on to explain that this is largely because knowledge workers tend to wear a lot of hats, where a steel worker is gonna be doing one thing, like pulling a lever or doing steel stuff. A graphic designer might be sending emails, fielding meetings, doing the actual design work, doing production setup, managing print shop coordination. That's my life. So it's hard to measure how effective or productive a person is in their position when they're expected to do all of these different things. It's also hard to measure the ROI because someone might have a higher workload than another person in the same position, so there's also a mismatch there. I might have published more academic papers to you last year, but this might have been due to a committee that you chaired. In this scenario, am I really a more productive employee? Cal eventually lands on the idea of productivity just essentially meaning activity or being in a place doing stuff. Not what you're doing, just doing stuff. When telling a story about Peter Drucker, Cal concludes with, as freelancers and small entrepreneurs in the sector became more prevalent, these individuals responsible only for themselves weren't sure how they should manage themselves. It was from the uncertainty that a simple alternative emerged, using visible activity as a crude proxy for actual productivity. The more activity you see, the more you can assume that I'm contributing to the organization's bottom line. Similarly, the busier I am as a freelancer or entrepreneur, the more I can be assured I'm doing all I can to get after it. As the 20th century progressed, this visible activity heuristic became the dominant way we began thinking about our productivity in knowledge work. This is all to say, if you're at your desk and on your computer, you're being productive. This is why so many companies are hell-bent on return to office, despite KPIs being the same or higher with remote workers. My last job was exactly like this. We weren't allowed to work hybrid or remote because they wanted to see us at our desks. Never mind the fact that I would spend literal weeks just scrolling Pinterest all day and not actually getting anything done.
What?
We then get into the subsection, Why Are We So Exhausted?, where Cal provides data and insights on the overwork epidemic with things like, American workers are now among the most stressed in the world. He cites Jim Carter of Gallup saying, these stress measures rose alongside metrics that show an increase in employee effort. Is a better approach possible is the next subsection of the book, where we pick back up on the CBS story and we learn about the formation of the show CSI and how that went. It's crazy. Cal uses this story of the show being made over the courses of years through all sorts of ups and downs and executives saying no and slow periods to exemplify that slowing down and slowly chipping away at something can and oftentimes does create incredible world-changing results. When you zoom out to the scale of years, his productivity is unmistakable. Who cares, for example, if he rested for a month in 1999 when he ultimately saved the network by 2000? I really liked how Cal weaved in and out of this story to make his points, and I really liked that he held off on the entire CSI thing until the end, where it contextually made the most sense to really drive his point home. Here we segue to chapter 2, a slower alternative, where we move from context to the setup for the rest of the book. Cal offers some suggestions for what it actually means to be productive in the freelance and knowledge work world. This is done in 3 subsections: the slowness revolution, a search for a better alternative, and a new philosophy. This chapter is really short, at only 14 pages long, and each subsection is a couple pages. Really, this chapter is a precursor to all of the actionable advice that he gives us throughout the entire rest of the book. However, this is the chapter where Cal makes his definition of what slow productivity is, piggybacking off of things like slow food and slow living, which, again, he explains in the book.
Slow productivity is a philosophy for organizing knowledge work efforts in a sustainable and meaningful manner, based on the following 3 principles.
Do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. I really appreciated here how Cal clarifies, I want to reassure you that slow productivity doesn't ask that you extinguish ambition. This philosophy can be understood as providing a more sustainable path towards these achievements. Few people know, for example, how long it actually took Isaac Newton to develop all the ideas contained in his masterwork, The Principle, over 20 years. They just know that his book was published and changed science forever. Slow productivity supports legacy-building accomplishments, but allows them to unfold in a more human speed. For me, personally, the idea of slowing down and doing less comes with the idea of less return, which is bad because I have a lot of stuff that I want. It is genuinely the biggest roadblock to me changing my mentality because I have such big dreams and I feel like I have to put in so much to get that much out of my life. I always feel like if I work less and I produce less, then I'm dramatically slowing the rate at which I achieve those goals and dreams that I have, you know? It's really hard to decouple from that idea. And the fact that Cal kind of acknowledges that slowing down doesn't necessarily mean reducing progress was helpful for me to read, and also kind of the reason I wanted to read the book in the first place. The 3 principles of slow productivity are the titles of the next respective chapters in part 2, which we're gonna get into right now. I don't know, what am I saying? Do Fewer Things talks about exactly that, with anecdotes, professional opinions, insights, data, all that good stuff. And a set of practical tips that you can implement immediately that we're gonna get to in a minute here, don't worry. I think a lot of us, me, get caught up in prolific output as a necessity rather than being a prolific outputter because we like working at that volume and pace. I regularly feel pressured to put out 2 videos a week at least because it's a quicker path to success, without acknowledging the fact that putting out 2 videos a week would make me probably die, or at least wish it did. While I do absolutely love making these videos, I literally can't sustain the level of output that I feel this pressure to have. What makes more sense is to do 1 a week or 1 every other week and have less pressure and enjoy my process way more. Just like Jane Austen, who Cal Newport uses as the example in this part of the book, I have things in my life that are obligations and things that take up most of my time, like a real job and family and a partner and friends and a band and stuff. So I don't really get to do this too much. And, just like Jane Austen, when I eventually have the opportunity to do nothing but these videos, my output is gonna increase a ton because I'll have been freed up of 10 hours a day. This is where Cal gives us his definition of the first principle. Strive to reduce your obligations to the point where you could easily imagine accomplishing them with time to spare. Leverage this reduced load to more fully embrace in advance the small number of projects that matter the most. Cal then transitions to the idea of overhead tax, which is essentially just when you put too much on your plate and can't get anything of quality done because you're too busy jumping around all the time, which, This guy. We feel like we have to say yes to all of these requests and obligations, and then we completely overbook ourselves and we take all of the time away from the things that we actually need to be doing, or even worse, the things we want to be doing. If you agree to take on 4 different reports simultaneously, the combined overhead tax of maintaining all 4 on your task list will eat up half your day in logistical wrangling, effectively doubling the time required to complete a single report. In this example, doing fewer things ends up producing more results. We are way better off just accepting the most vital things to get our jobs done and offloading all the other shit. Doing more doesn't actually mean doing more, it just means driving yourself nuts. A key property of overhead tax is that it tends to expand to fill as much time as it's provided, so long as a project is something that you've committed to and it's not yet complete. It'll tend to generate a continual tax in the form of check-in meetings, impromptu email conversation, and plain old mental space. Again, Cal goes on to explain that doing more things doesn't necessarily mean accomplishing more things, through a variety of more examples of anecdotes and different stories of other people. After what felt like personal attacks through some excerpts that you should read for yourself, I ended up feeling personally attacked and victimized by this book. Essentially, he talks about how freelancers and knowledge workers oftentimes use stress as their metric for how much they're getting done and how productive they are. Ugh. And he's right. We measure our boundaries based on how terrible we feel, not on what's most efficient for us. I know that I can put 4 to 6 hours a day into these videos and nothing else, but I don't respect that at all. Same thing with client work. I know when my effective hours are and I know when they're not. That doesn't stop me from working way too much. For example, I burned out really bad making the previous 3 videos that were a 3-part series because I went way too hard on them, and instead of getting them done in the 3 weeks that I thought I was going to, it took me 2 months because I burned out by video 3 and took a month off because I couldn't do anything because I was so stressed. And I didn't rest for that month. I was just worried about how mad I was that I didn't get the 3rd video out on time. Had I respected my limits and done those on a bi-weekly release schedule like I have been, I would probably be on this video way sooner. Cal talks a lot in this chapter about other people in all sorts of walks of life that has reduced their workloads and the tremendous impacts it's made on their lives. And these were the types of case studies that I've been looking for so long. We always see successful people talking about how much they've sacrificed and how hard they work on things to get to where they got, but we don't really ever see anyone hey, yeah, I don't know, I worked 8 hours a day and it was fine. So to read these stories was super refreshing and encouraging. This is where Cal starts to get into the pragmatic and actionable tips of how we can actually start to achieve do less. We have strategies of doing fewer things and how to reduce our overhead tax. Our strategies to do fewer things are to limit missions, limit projects, and limit daily tasks. Cal defines a mission as an ongoing thing that affects your overall life, a project as a thing that is in service of that mission, and then your daily tasks as things that go into that project. Essentially, it's a hierarchy. Mission is the big goal, project is the thing that you spend a few days or weeks doing in service of that mission, and daily goals are the pieces that you can break that project into. So obviously limiting these things means doing less of them, and Cal provides strategies for that too. I won't spoil all of them, otherwise again I'd be reading this whole book to you, but I will give you one example. For limiting daily goals, Cal says, "My recommendation here is simple. Work on at most 1 project per day. To clarify, I don't intend for this single daily project to be your only work for the day. You'll likely also have meetings to attend, emails to answer, and administrative nonsense to subdue. But when it comes to expanding efforts, unimportant, bigger initiatives, just stay focused on 1 target per day." He gets into the specifics on how to do that with how to manage overhead tax in a little bit. Speaking of the strategies to limit overhead tax, again, not gonna dive into all of these, but obviously the most subversive ones are make other people work more and spend money. The man really knows how to rile you up. For make other people work more, he doesn't mean offload all of your bullshit to someone else like a bloodthirsty CEO trying to extract as much profit as he can out of every individual person in the organization. What he actually suggests is just asking other people to do something for you first, very small, that doesn't get in the way of their life. We actually did this at my old job. So when anybody wanted a project done, a design of some sort from me, they would have to go through a link and fill out a form that was a creative brief. And it would ask them all sorts of things like, what's the due date? What's the turnaround? Does it need CEO approval? Are there references? What are the specifics? What's the print file look like? And then it would go into a system where I could then approve or deny that project as to whether or not it was relevant. If someone asked me for something at my desk or through an email, I would give them the link. If they didn't fill out that form, project didn't get done. We were very vigilant on defending that stance too. No brief, no job. This is a really great filter. Some people wanted a nice to have project, and as soon as we sent them the link, they just wouldn't give it back to us, and I didn't have to worry about it anymore. Similarly, when it came to actually approving or denying the requests, I could look at them and see what they were, and if something didn't seem worth our time or have a high enough ROI, I could deny it and tell them why I'm not going to do it. This is what Cal means by making other people do more work. Figure out some systems in which you can reduce your tedium and have other people kind of do the front end of that stuff for you. If a client wants a meeting, send them a Calendly link so they can see when you're free and they can pick the time slot instead of you having to go back and forth and figure out when it works. If a coworker needs you to write a report, ask them to send you an outline of all the stuff that has to be in it and nothing else. Spending money is similar. You know how like rich people have that second kitchen in their house for their private chef to make all their meals for them? Kind of like that. You don't have to be a billionaire, you don't have to be super rich to be able to spend money to get rid of all of this other stuff to do less things. For instance, there's a laundry delivery place here where I live that will come and pick up your laundry, do it for you, and take it to you. It's expensive, but I don't know, it might be worth it. Similarly, like I will sometimes order my groceries on Instacart so that I don't have to spend 3 hours fighting through Trader Joe's and Aldi to get my groceries for the week, and I can instead use that time like doing other stuff that I would rather be doing. That's what Cal means by spend money. It's not necessarily hiring people or all these big extravagant expenses. It's just like find places that maybe your time is more valuable than the cost of the service that would replace the thing you're doing. Words are hard. Cal also makes a really thoughtful point midway through this chapter to talk to parents that are reading this, like,
all right, dude, this advice sucks because I have a kid.
And I thought that was really cool. I actually made a note when I was reading the book that I felt like this advice is cool, but it only works for single people that are like freelancers. And this chapter happened where he was like, if you're a parent, here's some other strategies that are kind of in this world that can make this work for you. And then like throughout the rest of the book, he would address that, and he would also address different work styles. So it really felt like he took his time to understand everyone's personal situations when he was giving this advice, and that, I really, really appreciate that. A quote that really stuck out to me in this section about parenting is, "To be overloaded is not just inefficient, it can be, for many, downright inhumane." The empathy employed in this book is another really big selling point to me. I really like that he takes time several times throughout this book to say, like, the psychological ramifications of all of this stuff are very real, no matter what your situation is. Don't judge yourself. Don't be so, like, upset if it seems like some of these things are too far off. And he really, like, approaches everything with, like, a lens of everyone's situation is unique. Your mental health matters. There are serious responses to certain things in our lives and in this book. And it's just nice to like read a book of someone that's like, here's my strategies, but don't feel bad if like you feel like you can't do this. It's cool. I don't know about you, but whenever I feel really shitty about not working as much as I feel like I should, then I spiral and I feel really shitty about feeling shitty about not working as much as I think I should because people are dying, Kim. And it just becomes this like whole thing. Cal does a really good job of saying like, hey, it's okay to be overwhelmed by this. You're doing the best you can. You're not weak for having limits, and you're not weak for not being able to take on certain things or try all of this all at once. Finally, we close this chapter out with an actual real detailed system that Cal calls the push systems versus the pull systems. He advocates for a pull system versus a push system, which again is very similar to what I was explaining at my job before that I used to do, where people, rather than giving you tasks that you do for them, you have what he calls like a holding tank or a holding section where all of your projects go and requests go into this holding tank, and then you pull from that holding tank the things that you can manage that work. So for us, we would get the requests and then we would approve certain things and deny other things, and that was our pull. And then we would distribute them to the appropriate person. Cal makes a really important note to say that your pull system should not impact the lives of the other people that you work with. So you shouldn't be trying to get people onto some big new complicated Notion system if they've never used that program before or if that's like not a thing they do. Instead, find a thing that works for you. You could have a Notion template and a link that you send them, but they just get the link. They don't need to download Notion and like make an account and have the same thing and learn how to use the whole thing. It needs to be very simple for them. When a new project is pushed towards you, place it in the holding pen section of your list. There is no bound to the size of your holding tank. The active position of the list, by contrast, should be limited to 3 projects at most. For larger projects, you might want to instead pull onto your active list a reasonable chunk of work towards its completion. For example, if write book is in your holding tank and a free slot comes up on your active list, you might pull in the next chapter of a book to work on next. In this case, the larger project, write book, would remain in the holding tank until completely finished. Again, this is exactly what we did at my old job. We would pull projects in that were approved, and then we had a tank of like upcoming in queue, and then we would assign them to certain people. What we also were able to do was, because we used Monday.com as our project management software, when I would assign it to people, I could see like, oh, John has like 7 open projects right now. Let's give this to a freelancer, or let's give this to me. And it would allow me to see, is someone overloaded? There's a really great thing with this, that when you can see all of your things in one place, like I have a bunch of projects open, you then also have more argument for saying no to certain things. For instance, I had a time once where I had a project on my plate that I got yelled at from a person in a different department for not getting done quickly enough because of their department not giving me what I need, but we won't go into it. And I was able to just like screenshot my task list on Monday and be like, listen, bitch, I got 25 open projects. You're gonna get it when you get it. So it gives you a lot of leverage. If this sounds like a miracle to you, I actually found this is not a sponsored video, and I don't even use Notion because it stresses me out. I actually found a Notion template that is like a 1-to-1 clone of the Monday stuff that we used, where you can like have different boards and different tanks and projects and use that as a tracker. It's got like the percentage bars and everything. I'll put a link to that in the description if it's something you're interested in. I don't use it very much because my workload doesn't require that, but I did use it for a little bit. I also don't like Notion, so, but if you do, I'll put it down there because it is very helpful. I don't know if you can do the links to forms. You probably could do like a Google form or something and like make some sort of communication with it. I don't know how to use all that stuff, but it's helpful. So if you want that, it's down below. It is really important, if you're going to utilize a system like this, that you keep your eyes on it and you review it very frequently. Cal makes a note of this too, that you should weekly clean up your lists so that nothing gets out of control and out of chaos. I didn't do that very often, and it did very much get out of control very often. Turns out that my natural rhythm is just a chaotic, not very detailed mess of figuring stuff out. And, it's just the Notion thing, the Monday thing don't really work for me. Speaking of working to your natural rhythm, that's the title of the next chapter and the next principle. Pretty obvious, I know, but we're often not good at working to our natural pace and even knowing what that natural pace actually is. This chapter is really like a lot of anecdotes and case studies of people working at their natural pace, in which Cal says, don't rush your most important work. Allow it instead to unfold on the longest sustainable timeline, with variations in intensity in settings conducive to brilliance. If you're anything like me, the idea of the longest sustainable timeline is giving you a panic attack. However, Cal tells the story of Richard Lee visiting the Juhonsi community in South Africa as a way to explain the human's most natural rhythm. In short, these people were hunter-gatherers, and they spent all of their free time not hunting, resting, and preparing for the next hunt. Obviously, this is an allegory for the way that we should actually be working. I actually made a video about this whole thing as my first real video on this channel that you can watch over there. When you're done with this one. It's got a lot of insights, and what was fun reading this section of the book was that he actually referenced a lot of the same studies that I found on my own research that I talk about in that video. So I'm not gonna go super deep into that part. You can go watch it there. Also read the book. However, what I didn't provide in that video was tips and advice on how to actually work at your natural pace. Cal does that here in his section where he talks about how to take longer. Personally, I don't love the 5-year plan thing. I think life is too transient and too many things happen, so I don't do that. That was probably my least favorite idea on this list. But there's some other good ones. Cal goes into detail for like a few pages of each one, and my favorite one is forgive yourself. Again, this is more of like the empathy thing that I loved so much about this book. There's like a really strong emphasis that's very refreshing on going easy on yourself. You will get off track. You will fall into old habits. That's okay. What's most important is that you correct course and you try to give yourself the forgiveness and the tenderness of saying like, yeah, this is natural, it's okay, I can try again. It's really nice to have him continuously reassuring us that our psychological experiences and our lives and mental health are indeed very valid. To mitigate some of this, Cal suggests working in what he calls seasonality, which is possibly my favorite overall part of this book. It's an idea I have never even thought of until reading this, and I think it's great. It's literally like slow seasons and busy seasons. The reason the idea of seasonality hit me so hard is because I have severe seasonal affective disorder, along with a lot of other shit. But that essentially just means that in the winter I am completely useless and can't do almost anything. So with the idea of embracing seasonality, it's just to consider winter as my slow season. I'll work a little less, I'll be less hard on myself, I'll decrease my upload schedule to accommodate for the crippling depression that I will be feeling as soon as all of the trees are dead and I can't get out of my driveway. Cal tells the story of Georgia O'Keeffe and how she would embrace seasonality by going to a cottage during a few months of the year to just like literally not do anything but rest. And she would come back from that and kind of naturally fall into a busy season where she'd produce a ton of work. Cal also acknowledges that we can't all take a few months off out of the year to go to a cottage in the middle of Europe. However, he does suggest things like just slowing down. Again, maybe January is like your hardest month. So you just decide, you know what? I'm just gonna work to my job description. I'm going to do what's asked of me. I'm not gonna worry about showing up and going above and beyond so I can try to get that promotion. You're not gonna get that promotion. That was mean, I don't mean that. You can try to get the promotion, but like, don't kill yourself over it. You know what I mean? Instead of constantly burning yourself at both ends, why don't you just pick a month that you're like,
I'm just gonna do the bare minimum to keep my job in good standings.
that's it. That can be your slow season if you have a 9 to 5. Or if you're a freelancer, maybe it's like,
I'll make a little less money this month.
that could very well be just enough of a break that you need to come back at the end of the holidays and be like super ready to go crazy at your job and do really, really good. Just that little bit of rest, that little bit of like taking the edge off for a month could be the difference between like doing terribly all the time and coming back stronger than ever. Cal also tells some stories about people who have built their lives to maximize free time at the expense of salary. I also think this is really cool. Like maybe you don't need $200,000 a year and you'd be fine with $80,000 a year. Maybe, just maybe, the free time and like seeing your friends and family is a little more valuable and enjoyable for your mental health than having the Mercedes and matching Birkin bag. If that's applicable, consider it an option. Again, Cal suggests a number of practical ways to implement seasonality into your life beyond this. You know, meeting Mondays, which it doesn't have to be Monday, but pick a day of the week that you just don't take meetings. That can be like micro seasons. See a matinee once a month. Cal suggests taking PTO once a month to go see a movie during your lunch break, just to like break up the monotony and give yourself a little bit of joy and excitement. Schedule rest projects. The word projects, I think, was maybe a misstep in this book because it comes with like the connotation of like another thing you have to do. But like, if you like gardening or you like playing video games, like put them in your schedule as a thing that like, I am going to rest at this time. And then he talks about micro-seasonality, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, where like maybe if you're a freelancer, you take 4 weeks to work as hard as you can and then you just take 2 weeks off and you just work in that cycle. Or maybe you work really hard for 6 weeks and then you take 3 weeks to just work mornings and you only do things that are necessary to keep your income up. Or maybe you have a 9 to 5 job and you spend 3 weeks working really hard on your projects and then you're like, I'm gonna take 2 weeks to just do the bare minimum. Just giving yourself an ebb and flow can be very helpful to sustainability. In a little subsection that Cal calls work poetically, he gives a few more things, tips and stuff that could go into this whole thing. And my favorite one was that rituals should be striking. Cal tells the story of the Eleusinian, thing in Greece. They had a very strange ritual that they would follow that was actually like not for the sake of like talking to God or like getting any kind of mystical output, but it was really like just for the sake of experiencing the experience, which is interesting. He also cites the book Daily Rituals by Mason Curry, which I've also been kind of working my way through slowly, which is a bunch of stories of like people in their daily lives throughout history, writers and artists and stuff. And he picks the story of N.C. Wyeth waking up at 5 a.m. to go chop wood for a couple hours and then hike uphill to his studio to then write. Something about that got his adrenaline going and got him into the flow so he could write for the day. And, that was his ritual. I have kind of a similar one that I've fallen into on my own time that, is just like my daily routine for a couple hours that get me to a point that when I sit down at my desk, I'm ready to go for 5 hours straight or whatever. He suggests like maybe trying something a little weird, trying something unique to you that is so distinct that your brain can only associate that thing with, okay, now we're going into flow after this. The only thing that my personal ritual that if you want to know about, let me know, I'll make a video on that. The only thing I didn't love about this book in this particular section was that it doesn't really talk about how to get out of the mindset that you need to work more. That's a big thing that I struggle with, but thankfully I found another book that is talking exactly about that, and I'm gonna be doing a review on that. So do me a favor and like this video and subscribe to the channel and click the bell so that you're the first to know of when I'm actually done reading that book so you can watch the review and see what I thought. Finally, we move into the last chapter of the book, Obsess Over Quality. This one was interesting to me because at first glance it kind of came off like it was advocating for perfectionism, which, as we all know, is not good. Thankfully, Cal does a pretty good job of differentiating between obsessing over quality and perfectionism with an interlude about halfway through the chapter. We'll get there. What I found even more interesting, though, was his rationale for the concept. Cal writes, "This dynamic is captured well by a simplified thought experiment. Imagine that you charge $50 an hour as a web designer. Assuming 40 hours of work a week, 50 weeks a year, this works out to a $100,000 annual salary. Now imagine that after a few years at this level, your skills expand and the demand for your services increases. The standard move would be to scale your business. If you hired multiple designers, you could grow it to the point where it was bringing in millions in annual revenue and yielding you a salary that was well above $100,000 a year. If you continued this growth, you might even end up one day with an enterprise valuable enough to sell for a healthy 7-figure payday." In his book, Jarvis asks that you consider an alternative. What if, after your reputation spread, instead of growing the business, you increased your hourly rate to $100? You could now maintain your same $100,000 a year salary while working only 25 weeks a year, creating a work life with a head-turning amount of freedom. I really love this because Cal isn't bringing up quality in competition terms. He's using it as a vehicle to reduce your workload. A lot of us think that the logical path to success is to build a business, hire people, create an empire over time, and then come out with a big exit. And to some of us, me, that is the thing that we want to do. Personally, I like to manage people. That's what I like to do. But a lot of people don't. And we don't talk about the alternative of success being I make a really good living and work 10 hours a week. It really pushes this by saying, we've become so used to the idea that the only reward for getting better is moving towards higher income and increased responsibilities that we forget that the fruits of pursuing quality can also be harvested in the form of a more sustainable lifestyle. As with the other two principles, Cal gives us some propositions that can help us with obsessing over quality without becoming unproductive perfectionists. These are improve your tastes and bet on yourself. I didn't really like the bet on yourself proposition, personally. This is a point against the book for me because I feel like it didn't do the best job with differentiating between the pressure that we put on ourselves to produce and doing something that we like to do because we like to do it. It's very easy to want something really bad with a thing that we love to the point that we do that thing that we love so much that we end up hating the thing that we love. That's happened to me a lot of times, where really what we should be doing is working on a thing that we love when we want to, and it should be a thing that we love so much that we want to work on it all the time, and that is just a natural thing we do. And I felt like bet on yourself with some of the tips that he gave in here, it really bled into almost hustle culture advice with things like reduce your salary or get an investor or work nights after the kids go to bed. I don't know. It just felt a little out of place for the rest of the book. That's really my biggest gripe. That's really the only thing that I felt was I don't know about this one, boss. However, I did improve your tastes quite a bit. He talks about a lot of practical things that you can do to improve your tastes, like watching more movies or buying an expensive notebook, if that's the kind of thing that works for you. The logic there is that if you buy an expensive notebook, you're more inclined to use it because you spend so much money on it. Some of us, that doesn't work for. But the more important thing in this section was the concept of the Gap. And no, I don't mean the normie core clothing store. If you're not familiar, the Gap is a concept that's most attributed to Ira Glass for talking about this on, I believe, an NPR interview. The Gap is essentially a point where our tastes are stronger and higher than our proficiencies, our ability to create. So maybe you love Wes Anderson and the films that you make kind of look like a high school soap opera project. That's the Gap. And the way we get through and over, above, past the Gap is by continuing to work on our craft, relentlessly. Study the cameras Wes uses, the film he uses, who is his cinematographer, what kind of techniques does he use, what is his framing like, what is his mindset, what are the gimbals, does he use any kind of editing techniques specifically to him? With enough time and attention and all that kind of stuff and effort to replicate those things, you will eventually get better. The only way to improve your proficiency is to continually work on improving your quality. And the higher that quality gets, the more valuable that work becomes. And the more valuable that work becomes, the more you can charge for it. And the more you can charge for it, the less you have to work. You see how this goes? Perfectionism. This little bit is a few pages long, and it mostly makes its point by telling the story of the Beatles and their Sgt. Pepper album and the whole story about how that got to there. It's not important right now. I'm not going to go into detail about it. Read the book. But he rounds this out with the most pragmatic advice he can give here. Give yourself enough time to produce something great, but not unlimited time. Focus on something good enough to catch the attention of those whose taste you care about, but relieve yourself of the need to forge a masterpiece. Progress is what matters, not perfection. Setting deadlines and having accountability prevents you from being able to work yourself in circles. Learning when good enough is unbelievably beneficial. It's something that I had to learn very early on in my career due to the nature of being a commercial graphic designer, and I cannot suggest enough that you figure that shit out as fast as possible. Accountability or clients or deadlines really help with this. You have to get it out. You can't keep working on it. And that's it. I really, really loved this book. I'm very, very glad I read it. The number of stories and historical insights from other people, along with statistics and data and practical advice and things you can do today, was exactly what I've been looking for in a book for a very long time. Did it fix my relationship to my work ethic and the insurmountable pressure crushing me with the weight of 1,000 suns telling me that I have to work until my hands are nubs? No, but it gave me a lot of encouragement that there is indeed a sustainable way of working at a much lower pace that's much more natural to my personal rhythm that will still see me the same success that I want to see. Overall, I would give Slow Productivity by Cal Newport 8 frogs out of 10. Really, really helpful stuff. A lot of really great tips. Very well written, easy to read, well structured, but occasionally a little bit impractical or a little bit contradictory, though not very often. I think there were 2 moments where that happened. I really loved that Cal went through the lengths to really validate the mental health stuff of all of this and provide caveats for people like parents or 9-to-5 workers. And I think all of the ideas were communicated really well and clearly without any of the hippy-dippy platitudinous shit. It's practical, has a ton of insights that I did not go into in this video, and offers a grounded and encouraging view to the idea of slowing the hell down. I'm curious, have you read this book? Is this review convincing you to read this book? Are there any other books you want to see me read and review for you? Does anyone know when the pain ends? Let me know in the comments. As always, if you liked the video and you've gotten this far, it would mean the world to me if you would like the video with the little button and subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you are so inclined. I'm trying to build an intentional community of people that care about things like empathy and understanding and all of the other things that seem to be missing a little bit in the world today. So if that's you and it interests you and you want to learn more stuff and see more reviews and deep dives and all that kind of thing, follow along. We'd love to have you. That's all from me today. Thank you so much again, and I will see you in the next one. Also, I'm so bad at remembering to do this. YouTube thinks you'll like this one. This is the last one. That's it. Okay. Bye.